Welcome to Episode 6, Track Card Brands and Program Obligations the Smart Way. Today, we build a clear map of card brands, their programs, and the path obligations take as they flow through acquirers to the entities that accept or service payments, so you can navigate requirements with speed and certainty under exam pressure. The picture you carry needs to be simple enough to repeat aloud, yet detailed enough to predict deadlines, evidence, and who asks whom for what. We will keep the focus on how the ecosystem moves. Brand rules set expectations, acquirers transmit mandates, merchants and service providers respond with controls and proof. When that movement is visible in your mind, tricky stems stop feeling like puzzles and start sounding like logistics you already know how to handle. A crisp map turns noise into cues you can act on. Start by naming the major brands and the channels through which their mandates travel, because these actors define the lanes on your map. Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, and JCB each publish program rules that govern acceptance, security, reporting, and the consequences of non-compliance. Those rules do not drop directly into every organization. They typically propagate through acquiring banks and payment facilitators who hold contracts with merchants and through brand-aligned programs that oversee service providers. This means your daily reality is shaped by two relationships: what the brand requires at a policy level and how your acquirer interprets and enforces those requirements with dates, formats, and escalation. When a scenario mentions a brand notice, imagine the message climbing down the chain, brand to acquirer to merchant, and picture the matching message that flows across to service providers through contracts and program registrations. The brand sets the bar. The acquirer measures you against it and asks for proof. Differentiate brand operating regulations from the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS, then show how they intersect in practice. Operating regulations cover acceptance rules, dispute processes, data submission formats, chargeback timing, and programmatic security expectations, while PCI DSS is the technical and operational security standard for environments that store, process, or transmit cardholder data. They meet where program rules require entities to validate compliance with PCI DSS and to report status on a cadence, and where brand-level security programs introduce additional expectations, such as breach response timelines, risk remediation windows, or the use of specific validation instruments. In plain terms, operating regs say what it means to participate in the network and under what conditions, while PCI DSS says how to secure the systems that touch card data. On a test item, the safe answer acknowledges both. You fulfill the network's contractual duties via your acquirer, and you demonstrate technical security adequacy via PCI DS evidence and attestation. Merchant levels are the next anchor because they translate transaction volume into validation expectations you can predict. Brands classify merchants into levels based largely on annual transaction counts, with level 1 at the top for the highest volumes or elevated risk due to incidents. Higher levels drive stricter validation pathways such as third-party assessments and broader reporting, while lower levels often permit self-assessment via the appropriate SAQ, subject to acquirer approval and any prior event history. You do not need to memorize every numeric boundary to answer well. You need to remember the shape. Bigger volume or recent compromise elevates scrutiny, reduces self-attestation flexibility, and accelerates deadlines. When a STEM names a volume change or a brand notification about level status, prepare to respond with the validation form that fits the new tier and the communication to your acquirer that shows you understand the shift and its timing. Service providers follow tiers of their own, and brand programs set the reporting and audit cadence that customers rely on when making risk decisions. A provider delivering services that touch cardholder data or secure cardholder data environments for many clients typically sits under programs that require annual assessments by qualified assessors, formal AOCs, and timely notifications of material changes. The cadence is not just a date on a calendar. It couples with renewal windows, change control impacts, and incident coordination duties that must be expressed in contracts and demonstrated in evidence. For the exam, let this principle guide you. The broader the influence a provider has across customers, the more predictable and formal its validation regime must be, and the more portable its proof must be to those customers. If an option pairs provider tier uplift with independent assessment and customer usable attestation, it likely aligns with brand expectations. Compliance triggers matter because they explain why scrutiny increases and what sequence you should run when it does. New acceptance channels introduce different exposure paths and may shift SAQ eligibility, which means you must declare scope changes, update data flow diagrams, and confirm with your acquirer which validation form now applies. Volume changes that push you across a level boundary bring new reporting obligations, such as moving from a self-assessment to a full assessment or compressing remediation timelines. Security incidents ignite brand and acquirer attention. They trigger forensic expectations, heightened monitoring, and defined communication steps that may temporarily raise your level or alter deadlines. Read stems for the presence of these triggers and respond with the practical trio. Notify the right party, adjust the validation plan, and produce the artifacts that prove the environment and process have changed in the right ways and on time. SAQ eligibility boundaries are an area where brand recognition of scenarios meets your internal scoping discipline. Card present with validated standalone devices and no storage or transmission through merchant-managed systems tends to align to lighter SAQ paths that reflect constrained risk. E-commerce with redirects or provider-hosted iframes can offer reduced control sets when script integrity and change governance are in place, while fully integrated web collection pulls you toward heavier SAQs or full assessments because cardholder data traverses your stack. Brands recognize these patterns, but they expect your acquirer to enforce them with care, so your job is to classify channels accurately and choose the SAQ that matches the technical truth, not the marketing intention. The Safe Test move links the channel described to the most conservative eligible SAQ and pairs it with a note about provider-proof and merchant-side controls that remain in scope. Brand rules shape not just whether you must validate, but also the tempo and format of proof, including deadlines, evidence templates, and how exceptions are negotiated. A brand program bulletin might set a remediation date for specific vulnerabilities, require the use of a particular attestation form for a period, or define what constitutes acceptable progress when full remediation cannot be completed before renewal. Acquirers then convert those expectations into concrete requests. Submit your AOC by this date. Include evidence of targeted risk analysis, provide third-party letters for nested providers, and they hold escalation authority if deadlines slip. When a scenario presents an exception situation, the SMART response proposes a targeted risk analysis with temporary safeguards, a written plan with milestones, and acquirer engagement to record the deviation according to brand guidance. Exceptions are not handshakes. They are documented agreements with defined endpoints, because that is what survives review. To stay accurate, you need to know where to find fresh program bulletins and how to verify applicability quickly, especially when exam stems mention a change. The reliable path starts with official brand program pages and acquirer communications, continues with council publications that translate program expectations into practical validation actions, and ends with your own contract addenda that may embed brand requirements by reference. Verification is a two-step. Read the bulletin, then confirm with your acquirer which clauses apply to your entity type, your level, and your channels. In a question, this translates to choosing the answer that cites checking current brand guidance through official sources and aligning with the acquirer's instruction rather than guessing or assuming last year's rule still holds. The fastest wrong move is to treat stale memory as fact. The fastest right move is to ask the authority that holds your validation leash. Let's walk a scenario that maps a merchant's channels to brand obligations and the required attestations so you can feel the steps. Imagine a national retailer that accepts cards in stores using validated PIN entry devices, runs an e-commerce site with a provider-hosted iframe, and operates a mobile app that redirects to the same provider. Start by classifying channels. Card present with validated devices often qualifies for a lighter SAQ path. iframe and redirect can also qualify for reduced scope if script integrity and change control live on the merchant side. No channel uses merchant web code to collect card data directly. Now layer brand obligations. The retailer's volumes keep it at a high merchant level for some brands, which means a full assessment might be required regardless of SAQ eligibility, and deadlines will be brand set and acquirer enforced. The attestation package includes an AOC covering the full environment, provider AOCs and service descriptions, and merchant evidence that script integrity, logging, and approvals exist where the brand expects them. The shape emerges. Channel drives scope. Level drives rigor. Brand drives timing. Beware the pitfall of assuming one brand's allowance applies across all brands, because differences exist in level boundaries, validation instruments, and timing rules. A pattern permitted by one brand for a specific threshold may not be accepted by another at the same transaction volume or with the same documentation form. The safe reflex is to keep a separate row in your mental ledger for each brand tied to your acquirer's guidance. Then reconcile them into a single internal calendar that meets or exceeds the strictest requirement. On the exam, when an option says brands allow X, prefer answers that specify for the relevant brands and levels via acquirer confirmation. In real work, the discipline is to avoid universal statements and reports, and to cite the specific program names and dates you are meeting, which is also how you prevent audit surprises later. Conflicts appear in the wild, so have a quick routine for reconciling brand guidance with provider contracts when they seem to disagree. First, resolve terms by priority. Network rules and security standards define the baseline, and contracts allocate implementation duties and escalation channels. Neither can erase the other. Second, map the disputed clause to a control objective and ask which party is in position to operate it and produce evidence quickly. The answer usually points to a shared responsibility with a clear lead. Third, bring the acquirer into the conversation when brand timelines are at stake, and document the agreement in writing with milestones and monitoring. On a test item, this routine becomes a single clean selection. Align to brand guidance through the acquirer, adjust the contract or operating procedure to reflect shared responsibility, and set verification steps with due dates that can be shown at renewal. Memory anchors help under pressure, so build a compact phrase that links brand, level, artifact, and renewal month in one breath. For example, Visa Level 1 AOC plus ROC, April. MasterCard, Level 2, AOC with Assessor Letter, June. American Express, Level 1, AOC, May. And keep the set short enough to say twice without notes. The point is not to memorize an exhaustive calendar. It is to give your mind a hook that connects the actor to the rigor and the time window you live in. During a busy week, that hook reminds you which packet must be ready when the reminder arrives and which renewal you can align to a quarterly evidence sweep so you are never building proof at the last minute. On the exam, the same anchor reduces hesitation when a STEM drops a brand name next to a volume statement and asks for the validation route. Close with a one-page brand obligation summary assignment you can recite tomorrow, because speaking consolidates this map into a usable script. Write one line per brand you touch, naming the level or tier you currently hold, the attestation artifacts expected, the renewal month, and the acquirer contact process you use when a bulletin hits. Add a second section that lists your acceptance channels and the SAQ or assessment form that applies today, paired with the provider documents you rely on and the merchant-side controls you still operate. And with a short exception protocol, targeted risk analysis template, interim safeguards you deploy, and the path for acquirer approval with dates and owners. Read that page aloud once in the morning and once in the evening, and adjust any line that still sounds like jargon. The Payment Card Industry Professional, PCIP, exam rewards candidates who can connect brand signals to the right validation, the right artifacts, and the right calendar, and your summary is the bridge that makes that connection automatic. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.